show. Thanks for coming back. It's really great to have you.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.
I'm sorry Yala is not here. It's always more fun with him, I feel, but we need to give him a break sometimes. Um, and so I thought might be interesting to like talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing around modules and libraries. It's like a big theme, obviously, for any programming language. And I don't know if people notice, but so far we actually like just supported one file, which is surprisingly took us pretty far to an extent. I think it was an interesting decision. What did you?
Yeah,
What
it
did
can
you?
go very far with just single file programs.
Yeah, apparently. Well, not very far. We actually, I think, didn't build huge things with it yet, but it was definitely missing. And so the first thing that you added was support for multiple files. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like, what that means? If you want to show us something, that would be also possible.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like at the core of it, yeah, let's see if I can share my screen. Um, yeah, basically we can write programs in Wing that span, multiple files. So, um, and the main things we can share across these different files are, things like classes, structs, the types and other data
Declarations.
types. Exactly, declarations. So here's like my main, like let's say I create a module, um, the silly dumb example I always use is just like, you have some kind of store, or maybe you even have like maybe we'll call it a cache this time, just to think. Uh, and you can, have some kind of basic functionality. So let's say bring cloud, kind of to define things. Um, by default, right now, we haven't implemented like public or private specifiers. So everything is just kind of like magically exported or public today,
Everything's
although
public,
that will,
basically. Everything's public.
everything's public. Um,
Because we
but
could
yeah,
we could because we couldn't start with everything is private.
exactly. Yeah, we have to start from somewhere.
Exactly.
Um, so, and then importing it is kind of with this basic, it's with the bring syntax you might be familiar with, but you just specify the relative file name. Um, and of course you give it some kind of name, and then yeah, you can what was it? Store dot cache. Yeah. Yeah. No, some of the LSP things like we're getting, it's like 99% working, but there's always a few gaps.
There's
Um,
still no doc completion for modules.
Yeah, but it does compile, so that's all great. Um, yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. There's some interesting things about entry point files and non-entry point files, but
What about that? Tell us because that was exactly what I wanted to ask. Right, like you
hmm,
talked about declarations, and but there's also statements because in Wing you can actually just like write some code that just runs in pre-flight. And so how does that work with modules?
yeah, it's a great question. So I think it comes down to understanding like what makes classes in Wing special, right? Wing pre-flight classes, or there's kind of like these two flavors of classes. Um, uh, you know, we unlike just a regular class in Java or Python, we're actually building this like in-memory tree that represents the graph of your application. Um, and we do this, for a number of reasons. One is just to kind of give these stable names for cloud resources that'll be uh, like stable names across compilations. But a consequence of this is that um, you can create all of these uh, instances of classes, from different libraries. We create a cloud queue. And these basically end up forming a tree of resources. So all three of these classes are implicitly, right, injected. They're basically implicitly children of the root of the application. And then these themselves might have their own resources, right? So each cache has its own bucket. So I don't have a great way to draw it, but you can imagine there's like a
I mean,
root. There's
you could use the console.
exactly. That's actually a great point. Okay, so yeah, we have to give each thing a name. Let's do that.
I don't know how to visualize this idea.
If only there was a way. Oh my
If
gosh.
only there was a way to like represent the tree.
And so here we have it. It's
We actually
amazing.
have the tree right also on the pane on the left hand side.
Yeah. How does I don't know if I've actually
Just
used it
open it
before.
and you'll see it. It's kind of weird.
Okay, here we go. Right. So here's the tree of resources. So inside of the first cache, there's a bucket. Inside of the second cache, there's another bucket, and so on.
But your point was that there's a single root, basically, right?
Yeah, there's a single root. And so there's this question of like, once you have files with multiple projects with multiple files, like, are they all just kind of implicitly adding things to the root? I think the issue is that it kind of gets messy, right?
I
So
think it's not just about getting messy. I also think it's like, uh, a bit more philosophical, right? When you're creating a module, there is a concept of entry points in programs, right?
right.
C has a main function, Java has a main function, right? Like Rust has a also main. How's it called in Rust?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
also main. Yeah.
Also main. And so this idea of an entry point is exists in all programming languages. In most of them, it's not part of the language or part of the syntax in a sense. It's kind of like a convention that tells the compiler what is the main entry point, what is the entry point of the program, and that's exactly the same thing with Wing, right? Like I feel like there's an entry point, there's a root, and from that root there's a tree, and there's a single root, and there can't be multiple roots, right? Like that's
Right. Yeah. Like if you have a Python program with two main, yeah, it doesn't make sense. You usually the language requires just one main function. So
exactly. So in Wing, it's basically this entry point file.
yeah. So the entire file is just we treat it as an entry point file, and then everything that's not an entry point file, you can just only define. You can declare things, but you can't, instantiate them at the global scope, right? And that's the main difference.
Yeah,
So.
and there are also no like unexpected side effects. I think JavaScript has this problem where you can actually write code at the root of every file, and then you require that file, and code is executed as you import the file right into your code, and that could create side effects. And those side effects could be hazardous in cloud systems, right? Like you could potentially imagine a situation where a library or a model would create a resource that would cost you $1 million a month, and you wouldn't even notice, right? Or
Yeah,
hopefully,
unless you have the Wing console, but
unless you have the wheels.
but yeah, no, it's a yeah, side effects. It's just also just like hard to like it creates more things you have to kind of track in your mind. Like, oh, if I import this thing before that thing, then it changes
Correct.
what happens. Like, we don't like that.
Yeah, and we do have some. You added some protection against cyclic dependencies, which I think is another.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's all kinds of issues with like, I mean, yeah, it's graphs, as you just mentioned.
It's all graphs.
Yep.
Cool. This is exciting. I mean, again, I think like it's definitely something that is table stakes. We can't call this a useful programming language without supporting something like that. I think the next step is libraries, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So like, yeah, when you think of modules, like, I mean, we have these multiple file projects. Um, what does a module do for you? I mean, one thing is you're using it to just kind of organize your code, like group together different resources. Um, a really important thing is like when you have really big code bases, maybe you want to have a class with the same name, in a different folder because you don't want to have to deal with all these naming collisions. Modules help you with that. So in some sense, they're kind of a unit of composition. The other part is that modules let you package your code and share it with others, right? And the basic interface in Wing is that a module represents, a collection of classes, structs, enums, and interfaces, right? So that's what we're working on.
You meant a library, right?
A library, right? Yeah, package, library. I mean,
yeah. So we have modules, which are kind of like a local file that you bring, and the library is a way to package a module basically and distribute it, right? So it's kind of like it's still
exactly.
a module.
Yeah,
Cool.
and it's something we're working on. Like I think.
What about like versioning, like package managers, stuff like that?
Right. So once we start, sharing these modules, these libraries, there's a lot of complexity, and this is what software engineering has become, right? Like it's managing all these dependencies. How can we make it easier, smoother? I think for Wing, we're thinking about this both from the ground up and also just pragmatically. Initially, we're thinking of starting right with basically packaging your library as an NPM module. So kind of like how CDK libraries were all NPM modules, it'll be the same thing. But yeah, that will kind of let you resolve dependencies using existing like semantic versioning and other mechanisms like that. So you set
Basically
if you
using
make a
NPM.
breaking change.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So basically
Yeah, if you
using
make a breaking change, you'll do a major version bump and so on. Yeah.
Okay. But sorry, yeah. So basically using npm as the package manager, like that's the original think. That's the initial thinking. And so package JSON files and npm install and everything else, right?
Yeah, I've actually already started like kind of incubating this a little bit. Like let's see
Okay.
if we
Now
can
I'm
package
curious.
this. Actually, let's just try. Okay, let's actually see if this works. Let me. I haven't tried multi-file projects.
Oh,
Oh, it should work though, maybe.
go ahead.
So if I write, oh, I called it
Pack.
pack just to be. All right, we want
Got
to.
it.
Here
Nice.
it's like asking you to just create a package JSON because we're kind of building off of that. It kind of makes sense. If you're using any dependencies, you already need a package JSON today. So,
Right. Any like
but we might change that.
CDK dependencies.
Right, right. And then once you've done that, um, right, we have this kind of convention where maybe there's like an entry point for your library. Because we need to know like here there's two files, main and store. Like what are we actually packaging up? Like what's the first thing that people import? So
Although, interesting. So will it just have internal brings basically? Because it's an interesting thing. Because
yeah, there's some design work needed.
if it's a collection, then it's a collection, right? Like it doesn't matter. There's no tree, right? In this use case,
Right. Yeah, we could like also
we could just like
say
star dot w, right? Like just give me like a bunch of w files and it'll bring all their dependencies as well. But you can have multiple entry points theoretically.
yeah, theoretically, yeah, I think yeah, definitely doable. Although sometimes it's good to like have some way to say like, okay, I just have a bunch of modules, module files. These are private, these are public. We need some kind of mechanism for that. But yeah, we'll figure out the right thing. In either case, here we can just kind of like rename it, I guess. We'll name it lib, and then let's try packing it, and we get a tarball.
Nah.
So
And what's inside the tarball?
he had to ask. No.
We
Um,
know.
no, it's just the things you expect. Like, okay, so we don't want to package target, so I need to work on that. But it's the wing files as well as, any JavaScript you're relying on. Um,
Show me. I can't see it actually.
oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's
This
just
is,
next to. Yeah, there you go.
yeah, I like opened my Finder.
Okay, so there's like an index file that has what?
Uh, so this is just like, I think, a convention of like NPM libraries. Like you need,
Oh, you need an index file.
like a main to point to
Yeah, I
something.
think I got it. I think maybe we can like emit an error or a console log or something, right? Like some side effect, maybe.
Gosh, wow, that's controversial, man. No, I agree. And yeah,
Okay,
then
and then
there's
basically
wing files.
the two W files.
Yep.
Nice. Okay,
Uh,
can you consume it already?
not yet. Work
Um,
in progress.
ah,
But
wow, I'm so excited by this. Okay, I'm getting a signal that we're like way late, which is to be expected given Eyal is not here. Chris, always a pleasure. Please come more, and can't wait to play with the libraries and modules and start publishing. I'm constantly having some ideas, and I was like, I wish I could just like publish more libraries. It's like litter the world with like
I,
junk
I saw
ideas.
how many libraries you published on the CDK team. I know this.
Exactly. So I really want that. It's also a way for me not to like to not get in the way and like just like kind of publish stuff that's I feel like it's very exciting too. Cool. So
Totally.
thanks so much. Have Dana, do are we doing like the okay? Bye.
Bye, everyone.